This is a journey into sound. A journey which along the way will bring to you new color, new dimension, new values, and a new experience.
Welcome to the Ghee Spot Podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us for conversations around sex, spirit, and all things self-care. All things self-care. All things self-care.
This is a journey into sound.
Uno, dos, tres, cuatro.
You are a Ghee Spot Podcast with Katie Silcox.
Hey, beautiful listeners. It's Katie here. Welcome to our next episode of the Ghee Spot. It is brought to you by our sponsors today, Ahara Ghee, which, if you don't know what ghee is, I did a whole entire episode on it a couple episodes back. And so you can go check out that episode. But this is the best ghee in the world. I'm sure there are other ghees out there that are really great. And but this one's really special. It is made with cultured, organic, grass-fed ghee. It is made by people who love Ayurveda, who've studied Ayurveda, whose hearts desire to create the most pristine ghee as possible in the United States. And they're doing it in a traditional process of ghee making outlined in the Charaka Samhita, which is this really beautiful ancient text of Ayurvedic medicine. So check out our link if you want to order just the best ghee in the world. And today I am, I have to say, I'm really honored to be speaking about something that has been something that I've been thinking deeply about. And I think it was Hafiz or Rumi or one of these wild ecstatics that says, God mud wrestles me in the closet. And lately, the past 2 or 3 years, my relationship to yoga has been one whereby God, yoga, the great life force, my ancestors, whatever you want to call this great spirit that we all hold in our heart, regardless of our religion, our race, our background, we're all, according to yoga, right? According to the best perennial philosophies of all mystical traditions, we're all walking around with this love field in our heart that's attempting to give us guidance. And when we're listening, we can get that message. When we're quiet, we can get that message. And when we're humble, we can get that message. And when we're also confident in it, right, we can get that message. And so that love force field that lives in my heart, sometimes I don't want to hear the message. And so I get mud wrestled in the closet by God. And that's really been my relationship to yoga the past few years. I also want to start off by saying that, in this podcast, I'm offering up sort of a monologue, a one-woman show, and that will be how the podcast continues to be. But we will also be bringing in guests. That said, even if there's a guest on the show, every word that comes out of my mouth is coming out of the mouth of this particular sunbeam shining through the prism of this particular body. This particular sunbeam happens to be a 38-year-old cisgendered heterosexual woman who grew up as a Caucasian woman, American, living in the South. I've traveled the whole world, not all of it, but a lot of it, most of the continents on this planet. I've studied tantric yoga and classical yoga for now 20 years. I began at 18. I lived in India for almost 1 year, ravenously hungry to understand the concepts outlined in these ancient understandings of reality. That said, my perspective is mine. It's one perspective. And I'm open to learning about new ways of seeing, and I encourage us all to be. And so I just want to start off this conversation by saying this is my perspective. If something that I say resonates with you, wonderful. Let it reverberate in your body and in your heart, and let it form a part of the flora and fauna of your own perspective. And if what I say doesn't, there are so many people out there whose perspectives may resonate with you. So another thing that I want to say is that when we're speaking about yoga, it's important to understand that we're speaking about a cultural context. We're speaking about a discipline, a practice that is so vast and so complex and so multifaceted that comes from the continent of India. And on a smaller level, we need to remember that as we speak about these practices. They're coming from a particular culture. And yet, if we study yoga deeply, and if we study Ayurveda deeply, if we look to the ancient texts and we tap into our own intuition, both intellectually, we can find this in the texts, and spiritually, if you will, we can find it in our bodies. The teachings say that all of us have reincarnated thousands and millions of times. The teachings of yoga and Hinduism say that we've had as many lifetimes as there are grains of sand on the beach. All of us have been one another's mother. All of us have been one another's child. One of these beautiful principal teachings of Buddhism, Hinduism, mystical Christianity, the Gnostics, we come to this understanding that we've all been one another's mother. And we could walk down the street and look at one another as if we'd been one another's mother and one another's child. So yoga is infinite, right? The meaning of the word yoga is union, to be connected to and interconnected with everything. A true yogi knows that there are only these illusions of our separation. Ayurveda says that these teachings should be adapted and given freely to the people and the place and the time in which these teachings are being proliferated. So the teachings themselves say that the teachings should be available, they should be shared, and they should evolve and be adapted. If not, they die. Information and wisdom has a way of wanting to spread. And so when we live in this very divisive time, there's this tendency to want to highlight duality in a very strong way. And what that looks like is good and bad, right and wrong, you and me, us and them, Republican and Democrat, red and blue, black, white, man and woman. Right? And we live in these times where things are polarizing. And that can be a really good thing, right? We need to sometimes polarize in order to come back to center. We sometimes need to highlight in relief the injustices of this world. And that's what I believe the best of movements on this planet are doing. The best aspects of Me Too, the best aspects of social justice are bringing forward this truth that there are some people on this planet who've had far more privilege than others. There are some people on this planet who started off with an unequal playing field. It's such a beautiful thing and a beautiful time to be alive. And yet, if we only highlight those differences and we forget about our shared humanity and our shared inherent lovability and our shared inherent worthiness and the shared fact that what the teachings of Ayurveda and yoga say is that you are made up of multiple koshas, these layers of being, one of them being the fact that you're a woman, one of them being the fact that you're a person of color, one of them being a fact that you were born in Sweden or the American South, one of them being a fact that your parents were rich or poor, one of them being the fact that your parents treated you like shit or didn't, right? And so we can on and on and on see ourselves as this beautiful onion, right, with all of these different layers. And to do laya, to do yoga, Laya means to dissolve. Yoga is actually a process of dissolving these layers, of going into these layers and saying, wow, as a white woman growing up in America, oh my God, here are all the things that I was taught. Wow, as a woman, here are all the things that I was taught as a woman that told me what it meant to be valuable. Okay, growing up in the 1980s, I was in that cultural milieu. Here's what I was taught, right? And so as you go into all these layers of who you alone are the one who can do the laya, who can do the dissolution. And so what yoga teaches, and what especially tantric yoga teaches, is that life is inherently paradoxical. I don't know if it was a good thing or not, you guys. I watched the Michael Jackson Leaving Neverland documentary. And I'm glad that I watched it because I'm a yogini, and a yogini means you who want to dissolve the layers of reality. You want to see truth. There was a teacher, Deborah Bagg, in our Shakti school last week that taught on vaginal steaming. And she said, you know what? You know who Eve is? Do you know what Eve did? Eve was bad within a certain translation of a mythology in the Christian context. Eve was bad because she dared Adam to eat the apple. And the apple is symbolic of knowledge. And so knowledge, wisdom, knowing what's true. And Adam did it, right? And that's when he began to enter into this reality of good and bad and right and wrong. But really what he was doing was learning, right? Seeing things clearly. And so I'm glad that I watched the documentary. And I think it's a really important thing to watch, because whether or not you believe it's true, which I mean, personally, my perspective after watching 4 hours of these beautiful young men speak was that, I mean, if you tap into your heart and watch this, you know that it's true. I know that it's true. And, but whether or not you believe them or not, it's a beautiful, I think for one of the first times in the history of humanity, it reveals the process of sexual abuse. And, it's such an awakening for me and for many people. And I just want to stop and say that, I didn't know this. 1 in 6 men are actually sexually abused, and those are the ones that come forward. So we can make the assumption that it's many, many, many more. So I watched this documentary, and what also came true for me in this documentary and what these young men were saying was, it's really challenging when you're dealing with abuse, and when you're dealing with darkness, and when you're dealing with negativity, and when you're dealing with the horrific aspects of our reality. Sexual abuse happens. Racism is real. There are many people in this country who were made through our system to feel less than. That's all real. Right? And so when you bring these things into light, we can so quickly want to say Michael Jackson was bad. Michael Jackson is evil. Michael Jackson, we're so glad he's dead, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what these young men were saying was that is not true for them. The same person that did the most soul killing thing to these young men is also the same person that these very young men would say did incredible things for their life, that he could be a very kind and loving person. I use this as a horrific and stark example of the fact that within all of us, according to these teachings and according to Christianity, in all of us lives the potential for the worst aspects of humanity and the best aspects of humanity. So all of this to say, you guys, is that a lot of our issues come from the fact that we want things to be black and white, duality. We want to know good and bad. Why? Why are we all so obsessed with knowing good and bad? And I really see this in my Ayurveda school. In Shakti school, we have an incredible group of women. And me, I'm so freaking guilty of this. Guilty of this isn't even the right phrase, but I notice this in myself all the time. When I take a course, or when I study with someone, or when I read a book, or when I learn a new modality, or an old modality, there's this aspect of me that's like, I want to get it right. I want to get it right. I want to do yoga right. I want to do Ayurveda right. I want to have the best teachers. I want to read the most intelligent books. I want to know my dosha perfectly. I want to know what I should eat. I want to know how I can process my trauma from childhood. I want to learn that perfectly, and I want to do it fast, right? I notice that in myself all the time. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? I know you do. It's something called the idealized self-image. Where does it come from? Many smart people think that this desperate, ravenous desire to know right, wrong, up, down, black, white, this desire to make some people good and some people bad comes from when we're little. When we're young, our parents, by the way, I heard a friend of mine, Kimberly, do y'all know Kimberly? She's Maga Mama. I'm going to be on her podcast, and she's going to be on mine very soon. She's a freaking genius, and she talks about this thing called good enough mothering. So I just also want to start off by saying blessings upon all of our mothers and fathers who were good enough. And some of them weren't good enough, right? But most of them were good enough. And so all of our parents did the best they could, armed with the tools and techniques that were given to them by their less than perfect parents, right? But so when you're a child, regardless of whatever your circumstances were, like no matter how good or how bad, almost all of us were kind of, I think of it as a little bit of an indoctrination of programming. And I just came from keeping my nephew Jack for three days, and he's 2.5. And you can just watch how he's literally downloading everything we're saying and repeating it, and his memory is insane. And one of the things that we unwillingly and unwittingly do with our children is we program them into the importance of understanding good from bad, right from wrong. And we do that to socialize them, and we do that so that they won't just run like wild animals across this planet, although I think rewilding our kids and ourselves is probably a good idea. But certain level of indoctrination into the realms of good and bad, right? The Adam taking the bite of the apple, he had knowledge of good and bad, and that's another way of interpreting that myth. And so we teach little children how to be good, and you know, we want to keep them safe. But when we value add good from bad, and especially when we punish good, the bad, and you know, give candy to the good and give golden stars to the good and light up and give them our affection when they're good, what we do is that we really solidify in their neurostructures this desire unconscious, because when they're that little, they have no ability to parse this into intellectual understanding. They're just viscerally encoding this into their nervous system. What we're doing is we're encoding that, you know, in the worst of cases, when you're good, you get my love. And when you're bad, I'm going to take it away from you. Now, if your parents were like A++++ parents, and I'm, you know, a 1980s baby, so my parents were probably more woke than parents in the 1950s. I listen to, you know, older comedians who talk about like in the 70s, like we did whatever we wanted. Like there were no rules. We just like roamed the streets, and like how kids don't get any freedom these days. But like my parents will talk about how when you were growing up, like, you know, your parents weren't worried about your self-esteem. And so, you know, you were good and you got their love, and children were to be seen and not heard. And when you were bad, they took away their love. They were angry with you. And so a lot of times in our nervous system, our badness, we associate like with being punished and with being kicked out of the Garden of the Garden of Eden. And so I'm just laying the foundation for why all of us have this idealized self-image, this desire to be this perfect, holy, sublime, beautiful creature. I would say 95% of people on this planet, or maybe more, because that's a statistic I just made up. But we all have this hidden little demon or gremlin that is like this voice inside of us that says, be this idealized thing, and that's how you're going to get loved. This being good or perfect becomes a real absolute must. It's reinforced in school by our teachers. It's reinforced by our peers as we're young adults. It's reinforced in college. It's reinforced by your boss. It's reinforced by the bank, your paycheck. It's reinforced all the time. And my God, you guys, now it's even more reinforced in this virtual sphere called social media, which I think is doing sometimes more harm than good. And it's reinforced in this social media realm whereby we can tailor it through our images and through our words. And it reinforces this thing whereby all of us are walking around reinforcing a false belief that we can somehow circumvent pain and unhappiness and abandonment and lack of love by this self-image, this idealized self-image. And we wear it around like some sort of pseudo-protective mask, believing that this idealized self is going to protect us from the lack of love or the loss in our life. And really, if you look at the ancient teachings of Hinduism and Buddhism and many, many others, we are all afraid of, at the end of the day, of our own death, of our own ego death, of our own demise, because we believe that's when we die, we're done, right? And what all these teachings say is that that's this great illusion of life, is that when your body goes and your personality goes, like you're done. And the great freedom story of the Bhagavad Gita and the great freedom story of the Yoga Sutras and the great freedom story of Christianity is that the soul doesn't die. Your true self is not this idealized self-image. And so that's really what yoga is. Yoga is the realization. Call it enlightenment, call it enheartenment, call it heaven, call it the resurrection, call it the Christ within, call it whatever you want. The whole gig, you guys, is that freedom of knowing there is a part of me that doesn't die. I certainly sit here before you as a sister and a friend who has not attained that realization yet. And how do I know that? Because shit still really touches me and I'm super reactive sometimes. And that reactivity is a response of the idealized self being threatened. A lot of our unhappiness and our insecurity, and I'm speaking for myself right now, a lot of my unhappiness and insecurity comes when I feel that idealized self is somehow being exposed, somehow being threatened. And so what my journey is as a yogini is to look into the petty tyrants in my life. You know who they are, right? The people that show up in your life who knock on your door and reveal to you how fucking fragile you are. And you know who yours are. It could be your boss. It could be your mom. It could be your boyfriend. It could be people on social media. It could be your sister. It could be random person at the grocery store that looks at you the wrong way. Petty tyrants. Petty, not because they're petty because you're petty. And what they say is tyrannical to your idealized self, right? It's like when you live from the idealized self, you're holding this impossible image of yourself. And so when that comes crashing down, because it inevitably will, now guess what happens, you guys? You don't go to this place of love. We go to this place of self-deprecation. The revelation reveals like, oh, I'm not perfect. Okay, now I get to drop down into the place of shaming myself, guilting myself, blaming myself, hating myself, all that, right? So the pendulum swings from the idealized self that you may not even know you are holding. And that thing swings so far back to this hidden part of you that is afraid, right? So what does it mean to come home to your heart? What it means is that you are no longer rescuing anybody, you're no longer a victim, and you're no longer a perfectionist on yourself. Freedom is that if that is a triangle of a victim, a martyr, a rescuer, or whatever you want to call these points that we go to, the perfectionism, the perpetrator, the victim, then the middle of this triangle is your heart. And in that place lives truth. So all of those other places, we live from reactivity. In the middle ground of the heart, we live from a place called truth. So I try to really do this with my family and my beloved, my partner. You know, whenever I notice I'm projecting and getting angry, sometimes I'll just like put my hand on my heart and I'll be like, okay, what's actually true? And what's actually true is I'm so afraid of losing this person's love, or I'm afraid of showing this person how shitty I feel today. I'm afraid of showing this person like I don't feel beautiful today. I'm afraid of showing this person I don't have it all together. I'm not always, type A success mama that they see in their mind's eye. I remember my sister once said to me, I don't call you and ask you how you are. Because I said, sometimes you need to call me and ask me how I am. And she said, I don't do that because I just see you as so strong and so confident. Like you have your life together and I just can't imagine that you would need me for anything. And I was just like, wow. Well, let me clear that image for a second. I don't have it all together all the time and I do need you. And it was like this cool thing, right? There's so much more I want to say about it, but I just think practically, there's a way that we can notice if we're in the idealized self. We become aggressive, we become reactive, we become defensive, we become hostile, we become sometimes sarcastic, crass, overly ambitious. And a lot of those qualities, by the way, I just said, like, are glorified in our culture. This tapping into this place of like, am I really strong and independent, or am I being fictitious and creating a realm of superiority and aloofness? And then on the other end of the spectrum, we've got this anxiety, depression, feeling like a failure, feeling like I'm never good enough, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable. That's the opposite end of the pendulum. And so if you notice that you're in that place of self-hate, self-blame, lack of self-worth, or you're being a bitch and you're being superior and you're being blamey and you're blaming others. Blaming, by the way, is like so much projection. It's like, I don't want to actually feel the vulnerability of having my own emotional experience right now, so I'm going to make you at fault. There is a huge false idea in our world right now that making other people bad and wrong and guilty is going to somehow soothe the pain of my own heartbreak. And so if you notice you're in anywhere in that pendulum of I'm better than you, I know more than you, I am holier than you, I am another one is I'm more traumatized than you. I'm more traumatized than you is a way of you're being superior about your trauma. Or I'm shit and I don't deserve anything and I'm to blame. If you're on anywhere in that pendulum, we are in the place of the idealized self. The middle ground really is this truth. And So I'm really working this right now of just stepping into what is true for me. And what is true for me is not always pretty. And it involves touching what one of my mentors calls the essential pain. Another of my mentors, two different women, another of my mentors calls it the soft pain. Don't you love that? Oh, I feel the soft pain of my heart actually rise up as I say it to you. The soft pain, the essential pain of being alive and coming from imperfect parents and an imperfect society and an imperfect world that has imprinted pain into us. And carrying the grief of our lineage. That's not to make it good or bad, but that's the news. That's the news. So when I tap into what's true, what oftentimes first happens, you guys, is that I tap into the soft pain. Soft pain is squishy. Soft pain often involves feeling a lot of grief. It involves tears a lot of times. Sometimes it can involve great fear. It can involve sensation in the body. It can involve trembling. It can involve memory and imagery. Like watch Leaving Neverland, especially the Oprah download at the end. You'll see these men, they are in walking embodiments of soft pain alive. And guess what? Those men walked in hard pain before their admission. What is the difference between soft pain and hard pain? Hard pain says, I am not going to feel it. I'm going to hold it and I'm going to cover it up with a layer and a mask that you will never see it. Watch if you can't watch the whole thing, because major trigger warning. It took me 3 or 4 days to be able to process it. But hard pain causes so much depression, anxiety, and it causes us to not understand why we feel the way that we feel. Soft pain begins to dissolve pain. And soft pain makes us feel so vulnerable. It makes us feel young as shit. Soft pain is also the loosening of the hard pain that enables it to do laya. This is what the tantrics call. Laya means dissolution. And what Ayurveda teaches us, and what my teacher, Dr. Ladd, says is that, it's like a mango. A mango has to be ripened in order for you to juice it. So that is the essence of soft pain. You've got to get soft, like a ripe mango. And then you can juice it. And what, guys, is juice? Juice is nectar. Juice is nutrition. Juice is sweet. And so when I'm able to look at my boyfriend yesterday and say, Chris, I want to see you, but I don't feel pretty, and I feel like 1,000 pounds of pain in my heart right now, and I am literally about to start my period, and I'm looking out the window and the moon is full. Right? And so all of my emotions are right here. And I just start saying the truth, and I start crying, and this fucking rock star man in my life just holds me, you guys, so beautifully. And he's just like, dude, yes, okay, just be whatever you are. By the way, I stayed alone last night. I stayed by myself. I wanted to be in it, feel it, accept it, hold it. Now that soft pain has a channel through which it can flow. And what is the channel through which soft pain can move and flow? The channel is, I see you. I'm here for you. And what you're feeling is okay. I spent the past 3 days with my nephew, baby Jack, and, he was really upset because his parents went to the Virgin Islands, which good for them to do that, right? But not good for baby Jack because he was super angry. And we got the honor of keeping him, and he was screaming, right? And when they left, and I put my hand on his heart, and it was beating so fast, like a little 2-year-old. They don't know that mommy is coming back sometimes. And I just held him, and I was just like, oh my gosh, you're so upset. I can feel your heart beating. This is after he'd been crying, hard cry, ugly cry, snot cry, cough, snot cry for 5 minutes or more. 5 minutes of screaming kid is 5 hours. And I put my hand on his heart and I'm just looking and I'm like, baby Jack, like, oh my gosh, you're so upset. Oh, buddy, oh, I can feel your heartbeat. And I don't know what wisdom, freaking mother wisdom flows through me in that moment. And he'd been screaming for 5 minutes. And as soon as I said, oh, I can feel your heart beating so fast, and I had my hand right there, he noticed his heartbeat. And as soon as he noticed his structure and his organs, you guys, it was so cute. He just went, let's go play doctor. I have a doctor kit. Like, I want to go play doctor in my playroom. And the crying ended. It was like as soon as he found himself and I said, you can be this way, it just completely ended. It was amazing. So this soft pain, hard pain reveals the soft pain reveals your true self. And so I could talk more and more about this, but I just want to encourage us all to live from our true self and to look this week at our idealized self. What are the ways in which I am holding this perfection on myself? Or what are the ways in which I'm holding this punishment on myself? And am I pendulating between these two? Like, if I just put my hand on my heart and I said, what's actually true for me right now without blaming others and without blaming myself, what would it be? I hope all of you will consider joining the Lineage of Love, where we have a secret Facebook group where we talk about these things and break them down more. The Lineage of Love is $18 a month. We also, if you're like, I want to know more about these teachings of evolving Ayurveda, of Tantra, of modern science, and generally of this revolution and resurgence of women's wisdom and women's healing wisdom from many, many, many different traditions on this planet. I want to know more about those things. I want to go deep into those things. I want to heal myself. We have Ayurveda school, and that's coming up January 2020, but we're going to take a limited number of people. So get in now. And right now is the time to join because we have an early bird because it's, a ways away. So all those information, show notes, you got them, right? The links are down there. We also have our beautiful sponsor, I Love Ghee. We've got her link down there. Oh my gosh, best ghee in the world. They've got flavored ghee. My favorite is the vanilla ghee. That stuff I put on my sweet potatoes. I put on anything I want a little sweetness. So check out the show notes. I Love Ghee. Next week, we are going to be talking about a hot, juicy topic that everybody in my subscription program and my school are so interested in knowing more about. I'm getting questions. I'm getting comments. So next week, we're going to do a follow-up on my spicy podcast, Why Your Yoga Practice May Need to Die, in order to be reborn. We'll have a follow-up on that where I'm going to be talking about modern yoga. I'm going to be talking more about the science of yoga. I'm going to be talking about science in general and what it has to say about how we interface with our bodies. I'm going to be talking more about body yantra, the practices that we do in the Lineage of Love that are designed to bring us more into our innate nervous system intelligence, our body's innate ability to pendulate between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and how that innate ability gets short-circuited oftentimes by our intellect and oftentimes by the very movement forms we thought should be bringing us into better balance. It's not just yoga, you guys. It's everywhere. It's in dance. It's in Pilates. It's everywhere that tells us you need to be this idealized self. Okay, so next week I'm going to continue on that topic. I'm going to take some questions from the Lineage of Love, our subscription program, and some comments from the women in my community that really keep coming up and keep resonating. So if you want to know more about how this, again, is based on my 20 years in the yoga industry and the past about 5 years where I've been really deeply researching the nervous system and primal movements. If you want to know more about that, you can get in the Lineage of Love now, and you'll get my entire compendium. So when you join the Lineage of Love, you don't just get this month, you get all of the months. You get to go crazy. You can binge the Lineage of Love, or you can do it slowly, whatever you like. But we're going to go into that in our next podcast. You guys, it's going to be a juicy one, so stay tuned. I'm sending you love. I'm sending you and myself permission to just be exactly who you are in this body with all of its imperfect perfections and perfect imperfections. I'm sending us all the prayer today that we may look at one another, all beings, all ages, all places that we come from, all societal standing. I want us to walk around today and do that beautiful Buddhist practice of look at everyone you see as if they had cradled you in their arms at one point in time as their baby. Or you can look at them as if you held them in your arms as their mother. Much love to you guys, and have a great week. See you next week.
फूटे फूल अपन सूखे फूटे फूल